thinking about that so much of the time when I work with somebody, there's a real commonality to the first things that people say to me. And they will say things like, everything was fine, and then all of a sudden. And I think, what does fine look like? And if you can identify the good things, when your dog's body looks happy, it looks this way, the context. If you can identify when the dog looks like they're having a harder time, the all of a sudden doesn't have to happen. Speak, somebody speak. Don't leave me hanging here.
It's hard. I think it's hard because I don't have as much time as I would like to spend with my animals. So, like, I'm usually doing chores and stuff while I'm down there and with them. So I don't pay attention as much as I should to that. So I know it's really, really important. And I wish I was much better at reading their body language, but it does take a lot of work to do it.
Okay, but if I gave you, tell me 5 body and contacts, whatever, where looks happy, quote, quote, and 5 behaviors or contexts, whatever you look out there, those dogs, and they look like it's something you want to do less of, you don't want to have to experience as much of as you work through for balance and keeping everything status quo, I bet you could answer those questions.
You mean behaviors or like body position kind
Ways
of
that you
things?
can look out there and
Mhm.
qualify what fine looks like. Today looks fine because Beth did this, Shep did this. I think you could knock off
Yeah.
about 5 things without thinking about it a whole lot. And when you were working with Shep and you were trying to get him to not be so invested in, just all that stuff. I mean, those of us here spend a lot of time dissecting everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, thinking about it. And then if something goes wrong, it's not all of a sudden in your own head. You go back a ways and you say, okay, back to about this point, and this is where it started feeling funny, and if it's not all of a sudden, then it's not train wrecks, it's speed bumps, and dogs stay safer and people stay safer. And training answers, how to unring a bell is a hard one, but if it's a subtle speed bump thing and you check in and you work with it, it's not all that big a project and life goes on. I don't know. I think that Ellie.
Yeah, I don't think, Kim, to kind of give you something to think about is starting small. Like, I don't think it has to be a huge time investment. If you just pick like 5 minutes, even just one time a day, same time, 5 minutes, and just go and observe and just stand and watch. Um, you can use that to look for patterns of what looks normal, and then you can see if something changes. So normally, like if you go out at 10 a.m. and your dogs are laying down, relaxed, sleeping, and then one day one of them is off in a corner or one of them is pacing, or doing something that's different than what they've been doing, that's a good way just to kind of give yourself a cue. And you don't need to know any heavy, duty, fine slicing body language, um, observation ability to do that. You can just be like, oh, that's different. And that's kind of a nice way to start.
And that's a lot of what you've done, Kim, is pop up here and say, this happened. What does this mean? And I guess I feel like if people did more of that themselves, they wouldn't end up in such big trouble. I keep looking for ways for dogs to not be so at risk, and I think that's a big one. Do you think so?
Well, I think most of it for me is being honest that I'm looking at a problem because it's easier to pretend it's not a problem. And like I know when I'm looking at it, something's off and something's wrong. So I think you have to recognize and make yourself go, okay, this needs to be addressed. For me, that's probably the hard part.
Yeah, in a busy day and a busy life, yes. And for you, it's got to be, again, are you serious?
But no, I think I'm getting better at catching it because I can tell like if Beth gets needy, You know, like she'll just keep clinging to my leg or insisting I pet her, and something's up with her, and I have to pay attention to her. And Shep, you know, yeah, they all do have their little signs that something's going on or they need something else that day. And you just have to pay. I notice if I pay attention to it, I can nip it in the bud a lot easier.
You've always been
Absolutely.
good at that, as far as I'm concerned. When you first started here, you didn't have as many of your own answers, but you had always the right questions. You know, you never told me you had bad dogs. You would tell me this happened, and it'd be nice if it was different. How do we do that? You know, and that has to do with questioning fine. You know, what's working for us and what isn't, and when it shifts a little bit, how quickly you can notice when something shifted is very integral to keeping dogs safe and having them die of old age, you know?
Yeah, well, I'm lucky because I have you. So anytime something happens, I can bounce it off of you.
Well, yeah, I
Everybody needs
agree. And that's part of my privilege. And I wish, in thinking about how to communicate this, one of the thoughts I had was I wish people would reach out when things are fine and not when all of a sudden, because then all of a sudden doesn't have to happen almost always. You know, dogs don't go straight to shouting. Anyway, couldn't figure out. I'll never be able to sell. Your dog is perfect. Hire a trainer. It's never going to work.
Well, maybe you should do. No, I think it's a really good idea because if people realize how important it is to catch it early, and they can save themselves a lot of not problem, but you know what I mean? They can keep it from getting way worse if they catch it early. Maybe you can do like a short video on catching stuff early or some, you know, because it is important. It's
The arguing with your dog thing. If you go out there,
yeah.
look at the dog, and the dog says something, and you say, "No, that's not really true," and you go on, you get a train wreck. You know, if you go, "Well, I don't know why you did that, but it is different than yesterday, so let's take a look," then you know that's the conversation instead of the argument in my mind. You got thoughts on that?
On highlights?
No, no, on like how much it matters to be able to define fine.
Oh, I would, and Kim, you actually just did a really good example of this. When you said, my dog is needy, and then you actually went in and identified what behaviors made you think that.
Yeah.
That's a really, really good practice. And again, you don't have to know everything to be able to do that. You can start small and just even looking at like the dog's tail is a good one. Is the tail high? Is the tail low? Is it wagging? You can practice just looking at one part of the dog and then take into more context. But being able to, if you're saying to yourself, my dog seems sad, and like Cindy, you always say like, the label piece, but it's a good way to start of being like, okay, I'm labeling something. Something is making me say my dog's sad or my dog's needy, and then
Right.
challenging yourself and saying, what are they doing that's making me come to that conclusion and use that label?
Yeah. And labels are, I mean, I use them for myself. It's a summary in my head. If I'm going to share that with somebody else, I can defend it. I can say, sad to me looks like this, and this. Um, and that's the thing, like fine is a label that nobody could, I mean, that gives me no information. If someone talks to me, what does that look like to you? You know, for some of these people with dogs on highlines, it means they're not hanging themselves. They stop crocodile rolls. You know, it's not very useful, and I don't think it's very useful for dogs. Anything else? We have this time to kind of flesh this out a little bit, and since there's not a lot else going on in this particular Zoom, this is kind of a good thing to put in the library and say, when things are going really well, when everything is fine, take it apart, look at it. What's fine? What does that look like? Give me 5 things on any given day, what fine looks like. Because if you start to lose some of those, you go looking.
I think that's perfect. I know now I'm trying to think of all my 5 things. I know when I go down, they all act a certain way normally. And when it's fine, Beth does not cling to me. Shep does not jump or he cuts me off. Like I can tell when Beth needs something from me, and it might just be me to spend 2 extra minutes petting her. She's very clingy. I call it clingy. I'm gonna label like crazy.
You can
Be like,
label for yourself.
right. For
I'm not going
me,
to shoot you here.
she'll stick to my leg. She'll stay near me more. She's the calm, slow one on our farm. She's calm, she's slow, she's reliable, she's discerning. And when she needs something or something's up, she just starts clinging to me for a minute. And I find that and I say clinging, like she'll stay super close to me, she'll just keep coming up to me, which she doesn't normally do that much. If I just spend a couple minutes like brushing her or petting her or I look into their eyes a lot. I'm telling you, I look into my dog's eyes a lot to calm them down. And I'm like, give her a couple minutes and then she'll be relatively normal again. And sometimes that's all they need. Chef, when I walk in there with him, I can tell something's up immediately if he starts cutting me off when I'm trying to walk. Like he tries to get me to go a different direction or he doesn't want me to pet anybody else. He doesn't jump much anymore.
Good.
Hardly ever. I know. Remember? Because when
I
I
do.
think back, he used to jump all over me all the time.
I knew, and that body block stuff wasn't soft. It was stop now.
Yeah.
I mean, you could tip right over 100 and whatever pound dog. I mean, they don't just walk in front of you. They show up and plaster themselves, and you got nowhere to go. You got a wall-to-wall white dog.
Yeah, he would put his mouth on my hands. He never bit me or anything like that, but he just acted fast and really, really desperate. Just, trying to push me around, trying to get what he wants, jumping. So you taught me I got to move with him. I got to keep him moving when he's like that. Keep him moving, keep him moving, keep him moving. And eventually he'll calm down a little. And then I look in his eyes and I'm like, all right, buddy. So I have learned a lot about that stuff and it is
Yes,
important.
you have. Yes, you have.
And how my animals react. I learned how to read that too. Like when everything's fine on our farm, my animals don't react to the dogs. When everything is off, the animals act differently. Like there's
The goats telling them for
yeah, they
sure.
do. Yeah, they
No
do.
secrets.
So yeah, there is a lot there.
Yeah, and when you can tease it all out, then you can own it and you can keep the pieces. And if you lose a piece, you can go looking for it and get it back. It's a roadmap on how to stay fine and not all of a sudden something happens.
Right.
Ellie, anything you want to say along those lines?
Yeah. Every dog is going to communicate their needs differently. And I think this is worth seeing is how does your dog experience the world? And so you can do visual, you can do listening, auditory, nose, touch, and then how they use, are they ones who your male body blocking you like that? And your female does not do that, correct? Yeah. So that's something you can look at, and so figuring out how they communicate. Like this is something that I was just playing with Renee, and I can't. We've had her for over a year now, and it just now dawned on me. She is very, very visual, and she looks to me, and I realize I can communicate more with her with how I look back. And so I've been playing because I was watching how she looks at me and how she communicates different things to me. And she uses the muscles around her face and the way she holds her eyes, how open or how small. And I started doing that back with her because she is not auditory persistence. If she's focused on something visually or scenting, I can give her all the verbal praise or whatever, and there's no interruption there. She just doesn't care. But when she's looking to me, I've started, if she does something like I like, instead of doing a verbal praise, I'll actually do the soft eye back to her and kind of squint and blink. And I see her just like, oh, Yes, because I'm
Cool.
yeah, and I just now dawned on me, and I'm like, man, I wasted all this time where I was trying to do verbal, like, good job, and she's like, whatever, I don't even get like an ear flick back, and then it was just her doing, it's like a check-in, her like, and she was doing that anyways. I realized, and I just keyed into it now, and then so now with praise, I still do verbal because I can't help it. And
Right.
because Augie is very verbal, he really likes that. He's very, very sound focused, and so him getting like a good yes, he's like yeah. Renee doesn't care, so I still do the verbal, but I'll actually do. I think about you always being like smile because the dog reads your face, and that's Renee. And so I'll do the smile, but I smile with my eyes and kind of do the more squinty, soft blinking, and I can see her just being like, like so it's really cool. So that's something I'll throw out that I just picked up is paying attention to how your dog experiences the world, and then how can you then give feedback that fits how they do that. So
And here's another piece to think about. When I was doing my certification through Karen Pryor, it's supposed to be 4 live weekends with the instructor. We got one and then COVID hit. And so then everything else, people were wearing masks. And it was very interesting. Like I experimented with it here. My dog had no difference at all, whether I wore a mask or not. And I would have thought, a smile, you don't see as much of it, but there's enough of it. I mean, none of the dogs, and we talked about it together, none of us ever felt like any of our dogs were challenged by the fact that we were training in masks.
That's so crazy. Ellie,
I
that is
know.
fascinating what you did with your dog and the eyes. That is fascinating to me. That's so smart. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tape my mouth because I talk too much. Because I notice I chatter constantly, and I know that you've talked about that, Cindy. I think I just want to like literally put tape on my mouth and stop myself from constantly chattering around them and see if it changes anything.
I've found with Renee, and you can test this. This is a great way to see if your dog is visual or auditory with training, where I can do a whole set of commands with her without saying anything, and she doesn't miss a beat at all. I just all just doing the visual like hand
Yeah.
signal or how I turn, and she doesn't miss anything. Augie needs both. But it's just, I just started playing that with her once I realized the eyepiece, and I was like, with me doing that, and I'm like, what if I just didn't say anything and I just gave you hand signals? And she's like, boom, boom, boom. So it's so interesting to play with. Once you realize, like, oh, this is what works for my dog, and you lean into that, it's absolutely incredible. I know Renee was like, finally, you stopped talking because I don't care. You're just doing visual stuff. This is great.
Here on this ranch, with all the things that have been reinforced and talked about and whatnot, I can have dogs that are really far away from me and be thinking of something I want them to do and get ready to call or do or whatever, and they're already doing it. It's pretty cool, and they're far enough away that they wouldn't hear me and they wouldn't care anyway. I talk for myself. I just feel better when I talk. And I think most of the time it's not too big an inconvenience for them, but I would never count on it. But with my little mini schnauzer and the really careful work that we were doing, that was static. It got in her way. She just did this sigh like, thank God she shut up. And I didn't even notice it. The video that my instructor said that, I thought, I never talked, and I listened to it, and I think I counted 30 times. And it's like a 2-minute video. I was so embarrassed. But I got a lot better. And I find when I'm doing really careful training, I seldom speak. I just really counsel myself to say it with my body, say it through my hands, say it spatially, how close I am. If I move my body, will the dog be drawn with me? If I, all that stuff. And it just becomes this dance. And it's one of those things where you watch people be that way with their dogs and you're thinking, well, nothing's happening. When are they going to train? When are they going to show me something cool? And it's like, it's ballet steps all right in front of you. And I really think, I'm quite sure, Kim, that you do exactly that with those dogs. And if somebody else was watching, like Ellie, she could do a little video and tell you 20 times that you cued something and got it without even flashing on that you meant to, you know?
If you guys want to try something really fun, I just remembered this. This is from, I got this from Patricia McConnell's book, The Other End of the Leash, which is a fascinating read.
Yeah.
She did a whole chapter talking about how her and one of her friends helped get two lost dogs who were on the other side of a highway across to them just using whether they were leaning forward or leaning back. And I read that chapter and I ran out and started leaning forward and leaning back. And it is fascinating because it just never occurred to me that that kind of spatial pressure in body language, what that means to a dog, and watching my dogs moving back and coming forward and moving back, depending on how I was leaning. And that was so valuable to me for working with the dogs I work with in the shelters, being cognizant, am I leaning forward? Because that's going to create that pushback, or being able to lean back or being neutral. It's so incredible. I highly recommend playing and seeing if you guys' dogs do the same, because it's so simple. You just go and you like lean forward, lean back. It's really cool.
Well, it's also a great way to ask a dog whether they want to stick around.
Mm.
Are we both having a good time? If you lean back or take a step back and the dog comes with you, there's your answer. And it's
True.
just as simple as that. And I think about, like when I work with people that are very, what's the word, compunction, correct,
Oh,
commands instead of,
compulsion
yeah.
or compulsory.
Yes, when they
Yeah.
go out and they try the positive reinforcement stuff, if it's a try instead of a do, it still shows in their body, and the dogs know the difference. They're trying to do this, and you do have to talk it through in your head. You do have to go out there on faith and say, we're going to try this, see what happens. But the catch of what your body's doing is what the dog sees as you walk out the house and before you ever get out there. And that's when training sessions start, is when the dog sees you and you get out there and you're ready and the dog's already going at same day, different, and change happens more slowly with that. And like with working with a whole pack of puppies, I can tell you over and over again, 12 puppies at a time. If I would walk out there tall, soft, calm, easy eye contact, slow hands, low hands, they'd mirror that and they'd come in with me like that and they'd start with that. And I never walked in a field with any of them until I got that from the other side of the fence, and so the conversation starts so far back, and it's all this stuff that, like, if you talk about what a really good trainer does, and how to break it all down. I don't know how you could even say it. I was very aware of it in training parrots because they're so hyper vigilant about any spatial, boy, tune you up big. And these birds in a big area that can fly away, you learn to really be cognizant of what your body's doing. And when I get invested, I'd think, step back, breathe, take a nice deep breath, start again, feed a peanut while I do that. And stuff's really beautiful. And that goes back to, I mean, if you know those kinds of things and do those kinds of things, you do know what fine means, and you do know that it's not all of a sudden. You would know, you're not going to get blindsided like that.